The situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, has reached a harrowing peak, with the Rwandan-backed M23 armed group allegedly executing over 140 civilians, predominantly ethnic Hutu, in July 2025. This tragic event unfolded across at least 14 villages and small farming communities near the renowned Virunga National Park in eastern DRC. The mass killings are believed to be part of a broader military strategy aimed at dismantling the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda, FDLR, an armed group largely composed of Rwandan Hutu who were involved in the 1994 genocide, along with other rival factions. According to a report from Human Rights Watch, credible sources suggest that the death toll in Rutshuru territory since July could surpass 300, marking one of the most severe atrocities committed by the M23 since its resurgence in late 2021. Between July 10th and July 30th, M23 fighters executed local residents and farmers, including women and children, in their homes, fields, and near the Rutshuru River within the Binza administrative subdivision of Rutshuru territory, located in north. From mid-July to mid-August, Human Rights Watch conducted interviews with 36 individuals via telephone, including 25 witnesses, local activists, medical personnel, military officials, and UN representatives. They also analyzed relevant videos and photographs, consulted forensic experts, and corroborated testimonies using maps and satellite imagery. The organization compiled a list of 141 individuals who were either confirmed dead or are missing and presumed dead. On August 6th, the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights reported that at least 319 civilians were killed by the M23, with support from the RDF, between July 9th and July 21st, across 4 villages in Rutshuru. This figure aligns with information gathered by Human Rights Watch from various sources. Additionally, reports indicated that the M23 executed another 41 civilians between July 30th and August 8th in the Binza groupment, although this information could not be independently verified. Human Rights Watch reached out to Rwandan authorities on August 7th and to M23 leader Bertrand Bisimwa on August 8th for comments regarding the killings, but received no replies. The Alliance Fleuve Congo, AFC, a political military coalition that includes the M23, dismissed the UN's allegations on August 7th. On August 11th, the Rwandan government also rejected claims of RDF involvement in the operations, asserting that an armed group opposed to the M23 was responsible for the killings. Human Rights Watch documented credible information about killings in July in various localities, including Busesa, Kakoro, Kafuru, Kasave, Katanga, Katemba, Katwaguru, Kihito, Kisaguru, Congo, Lubumbashi, Nyamilima, Nyabanira, and Rubare. These areas were under M23 control, and several commanders were identified at various locations. Witnesses reported that M23 fighters instructed them to bury the bodies immediately in the fields or leave them unburied, effectively preventing families from conducting proper funerals. In some instances, M23 fighters disposed of bodies, including those of women and children, by throwing them into the Rutshuru River. The mass killings seem to be part of a military campaign targeting opposing armed groups, particularly the FDLR. Most of the victims were ethnic Hutu, with a smaller number being ethnic Nande. Human Rights Watch expressed serious concerns about the potential for ethnic cleansing in Rutshuru territory due to the M23's targeting of Hutu civilians living near FDLR strongholds. Research indicates that the M23's military operations were executed by the 1st Battalion of the 1st Brigade, under the command of Colonel Samuel Mushagara and Brig General Bodwin Nagariye, who was already under UN sanctions for his involvement in M23 war crimes. Residents also reported the presence of Rwandan military personnel during M23 operations, identifying them by their uniforms and accents. the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights and military sources have confirmed the involvement of the Rwandan military in these operations. The Rwandan government, which effectively controls the territory occupied by the M23, should permit UN and independent international forensic experts to gather and analyze evidence of war crimes, including those from the UN Human Rights Office and the Independent UN Commission of Inquiry on Congo, once it becomes operational. The UN Security Council, the European Union, and various governments should denounce these serious abuses, impose additional sanctions on those responsible, and advocate for the arrest and prosecution of commanders implicated in war crimes. Countries providing military assistance to Rwanda must urgently reassess their programs to ensure they are not contributing to these violations. These killings in Rutshuru territory occurred just weeks after a preliminary agreement was reached in a US-brokered peace deal signed on June 27 between Congo and Rwanda. This agreement requires Congo to implement a plan to neutralize the FDLR as Rwanda withdraws from Congolese territory, while also mandating the protection of civilians and facilitating the movement of the UN peacekeeping mission, known as MONUSCO. The agreement's joint security coordination mechanism should ensure that any crimes committed during anti-FDLR operations are thoroughly investigated, according to Human Rights Watch. Demonjoy emphasized, the mass killings by the Rwanda-backed M23 starkly highlight the disconnect between international rhetoric and the harsh reality faced by civilians in eastern Congo. Governments pursuing peace agreements must adhere to the laws of war, and those responsible for war crimes must be fully investigated and brought to justice. For further insights, legal context, and witness accounts, please refer to the detailed sections below. Allegations of mass killings by the M23. The M23 killings reportedly began around July 10th, primarily in fields north and south of the road that runs through Kiseguru and Katwiguru in Rutshuru territory. Witnesses recounted that M23 fighters surrounded the area, blocking all roads to prevent residents from escaping. After July 14, reports indicated that the M23 executed individuals in Yamalima, located 25 kilometers from Kiseguru. Human Rights Watch documented executions by the M23 up until July 30 in Yamanira, specifically targeting those who had come to search for or bury their loved ones, or to gather food from their fields. Human Rights Watch analyzed 21 photographs and videos sent directly to researchers which depicted the bodies of victims. However, due to the absence of metadata, the exact location, time, and dates of the images could not be confirmed. The identities of some victims were verified through witness testimonies. The images strongly support claims of executions by machete and gunfire, as confirmed by the independent forensic expert group of the International Rehabilitation Council for Torture Victims. In its statement on August 7th, the AFC M23 claimed that some of the locations where the UN reported killings, many of which were corroborated by Human Rights Watch, are primarily within Virunga National Park, where they asserted that farmland does not exist. This attempt to undermine the UN's allegations regarding M23 killings of farmers in those areas does not align with the facts, as satellite imagery and witness accounts indicate that these regions have been utilized for farming for many years. Witness accounts. 3 farmers recounted that the attacks on their fields and the nearby forest commenced on July 10 or 11th. One farmer who had been living in a field near Kiseguru stated, "I left to hide some tools, but when I returned to get my family, I saw the M23 had reached them. I could see them from a distance. They were all shot dead." Tragically, his wife and their 3 children, aged 9 months to 10 years, were killed before his eyes. Another individual reported that 5 members of his family were murdered in Katanga, approximately 12 kilometers northwest of Kiseguru. "We woke up on July 11, and the M23 were there in large numbers. They were already on our doorstep. They killed people with guns and machetes. Villagers discovered the bodies of a 47-year-old man and his 4 children, aged 11 to 17, in a field about 18 kilometers from Kisiguru on July 11. "We found him in his field with his head cut off," recounted a man who found and buried them. "They were all killed with machetes. Their throats were cut." A man whose wife and 2 children, aged 14 and 21, were killed, witnessed the M23 abduct his family from their field in Katanga on July 10, along with 2 other women and a child. A witness later informed him that they had seen the M23 execute them at the confluence of the Rutshuru, also known as Kitchuru, and Ivi, also known as Rive, rivers, about 10 kilometers to the north. A woman who witnessed M23 fighters kill her husband with a machete on July 11 described how the fighters rounded up women and children that day. "Around 10 a.m., we were forced to walk toward the place where our lives were going to end," she recalled. "We walked in silence. If a child started crying, they threatened to kill them. They killed with knives." She noted that they were a group of about 70 people, including women and girls. "We walked all day until we reached the confluence of the Kitchuru, Rutshuru, and Rive rivers in the evening. They told us to sit on the edge of the riverbank, and then they started shooting at us." She identified 47 individuals, including children, who were killed, and managed to escape by falling into the river without being shot. Human Rights Watch received reports that the M23 conducted mass killings by the Rutshuru River for several consecutive days. Residents and witnesses indicated that the M23 continued executing individuals until at least July 30th. One woman mentioned that her relative was among the deceased in a photograph analyzed by Human Rights Watch, which depicted 6 bodies. "He was from Nyabanira and fled here to Kiwanja, but because life is hard here, we have to go back to our fields in Nyabanira to find food. If we're lucky, we come back. If we're unlucky, we run into the M23, and that's the end. It's death. My relative went on July 30th to look for food and never came back. Someone who saw his body came to tell us and gave us his hat. We recognized him in the photo with 5 other men." Human Rights Watch independently confirmed the identities of 4 men in the photograph. The independent forensic expert group analyzed the image and concluded that visible hand ties were present on 3 of the men, while a 4th likely had his hands bound behind him. The group noted that all exhibited injuries consistent with gunshot wounds. An unknown number of civilians were also injured during the attacks. 3 medical sources reported that the injured, including a 22-month-old child, were taken to nearby medical facilities for treatment, suffering from gunshot or machete wounds. Anti-FDLR operations. The area where the M23 military operations occurred borders Virunga National Park and regions where the FDLR have been active for decades. For years, civilians have found themselves caught in the crossfire between Congolese government forces and armed groups like the FDLR. Many of the farmers killed during the July operations were either local residents or migrant workers who had traveled from more distant villages and towns, such as Tongo and Kanyabayonga, to work in the fertile valley adjacent to the park. Some lived in the fields, working alongside their entire families. Residents and an independent source informed Human Rights Watch that the M23 had intermittently restricted access to farmland under the pretext of conducting anti-FDLR operations, including on July 10th, instructing people to relocate to urban centers. Free residents recalled that in June, an M23 commander, Colonel Claude Imani, had authorized farmers to return to their fields. Satellite imagery confirms that the area was being cultivated again after early June, as numerous new clearings appeared in previously overgrown fields. Farmers interviewed indicated that they were required to pay a one-time tax of $10 to the M23 to be allowed to work in the fields again. "They are still in our fields, claiming they are pursuing the FDLR," said a man whose wife and 2 children were killed on July 11th. That's why they left men's bodies in the fields, but they took the women and children to kill them by the river. Human Rights Watch received credible information that the M23, the FDLR, and other armed groups were engaged in combat in the area both before and during the summary executions. A splinter faction of the FDLR, known as the Rwandan-controlled Rally for Unity and Democracy, controls certain areas bordering Virunga National Park, including the Bwisha chiefdom, which encompasses the Binza groupment, and has a base near the confluence of the Ivi and Rutshuru rivers. On August 11th, Rwanda's Foreign Affairs Minister, in a post on X, attributed the killings to fighters from the Collective Movement for Change, CMC Nyatura, a Hutu armed group opposed to the M23. However, witnesses and residents informed Human Rights Watch that fighters from the FDLR and CMC Nyatura were rarely seen in villages since the M23 took control of the area in August 2024, and all those interviewed attributed the killings to the M23. On July 30th, M23 officials in Ishasha announced via loudspeakers that newcomers needed to report to the administration. This included individuals who had fled killings in neighboring areas, according to 2 local sources. Men under 45 years old were detained and taken to a building near the border with Uganda, where they reportedly faced beatings, and the following day were loaded onto trucks. A source who was part of the group stated that the M23 accused them of fleeing their villages to come to Ishasha and claimed they were supporting the FDLR, the Congolese army, or the government-backed Wazalendo coalition of armed groups. A video shared on social media on August 1st, which Human Rights Watch geolocated and verified, shows numerous men being marched along the main road in Ishasha toward the northern part of the town where the border post is located. At least some of these men were later released. The M23 frequently accuses suspected opponents, often without evidence, of collaborating with the FDLR, other armed groups, or the Congolese army. In May, the M23 rounded up individuals in Goma, the provincial capital of North Kivu, and surrounding areas, whom they accused of supporting opposing forces. Some were taken away by vehicle to unknown locations. Among those rounded up were individuals originally from Karenga in Masisi territory, which is also considered an FDLR stronghold. International law. All parties involved in the armed conflict in eastern Congo, including non-state armed groups, are obligated to adhere to international humanitarian law, which prohibits attacks on civilians, summary executions, torture, forced displacement, looting, and other forms of abuse. While the term ethnic cleansing is not formally defined under international law, a UN Commission of Experts has characterized it as a purposeful policy designed by one ethnic or religious group to remove by violent and terror-inspiring means the civilian population of another ethnic or religious group from certain geographic areas. Individuals who commit serious violations of the laws of war with criminal intent are liable for war crimes. Commanders who are aware of or should be aware of serious abuses by their forces and fail to take appropriate action may be prosecuted under the principle of command responsibility. War crimes and other atrocity crimes fall under universal jurisdiction, allowing other nations to prosecute them regardless of where the crimes occurred or the nationalities of the victims and perpetrators. In October 2024, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court announced that his office would renew its investigative efforts in Congo, focusing on crimes in North Kivu since January 2022. This investigation should encompass the M23's summary executions of civilians and other serious abuses in eastern Congo, as emphasized by Human Rights Watch.